All right, so I'm going to be covering the best grind spots in Black Desert Online from season to end game. So if you followed my channel for a while now, then you know that I've been covering a variety of grind spots kind of over the past year with my money per hour grind series. And I figured since, I've covered most of the grind spots, most, not all, but most, I wanted to make this video on the best grind spots pretty much from like when you first start the game as a new player all the way to end game. Also, I will link my money per hour grind video series down below in the description. So if you want more details on like mechanics and just more specific details on those spots, then I highly recommend you checking out those. Also, huge disclaimer, the money per hour at these grind spots can greatly vary based on your drop rate, your gear, right? Like how much AP you have. If you're using Agris, which increases your trash loot, the class that you play can make a huge difference, right? On how much money you can make. And, if you're using either the level 1 or blue loot scroll or the level 2 or yellow loot scroll, right? So there are a lot of factors that can determine how much money you can make at these spots. So just keep that in mind. Also, I'll be comparing, the numbers with Garmoth, right? And my personal numbers, but just take Garmoth's numbers kind of with a grain of salt because you're trusting people to accurately put in the correct numbers, right? Also with Garmoth, I'm setting the drop rate percent at 112 with a yellow loot scroll. Also, real quick, with my personal numbers, right, they are based on the first few hours of that specific grinding spot. So they are a little bit lower than, say, someone who has spent like 50 hours at that grinding spot, right? Also, I'm just an average gaming dad that's just kind of pulling average to sub-average numbers. So most likely you will outperform me with my numbers, right? So yeah, with all of those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into it. All right, first up, let's talk about the season and early game grind spots. So when you first start out as a new player, you're probably going to want to focus on doing the quest line, the main quest line. However, you could just jump straight right into it, especially if you're a returning player. But essentially, you're going to want to stay in the season server until you're able to get like full pin Tuvala gear, which is around 240 to 250-ish AP and 310-ish DP. So that can kind of vary, especially, if you're like doing the journals to get additional AP and DP. But either way, once you kind of reach that full pin Tuvala gear, you're going to stay in that season server until then, right? Once you reach that mark, then you can kind of graduate to the regular servers or graduate your season character, right? So let's take a look at the spots that is below 240 AP. And again, we'll be looking at Garmoth, and with Garmoth, I have the drop rate set at a standard rate of 112% with a yellow loot scroll. So, when you're doing these spots, your drop rate most likely will be higher, right? And which will in turn have you making more money. So just kind of remember that. All right. So before I do like a ranking system, I want to talk about Polly's Forest first, just because I think as a new player, this is probably the best spot to start out with once you reach the gear requirements, because the mobs are so close together and you can just kind of run a really tight circle. And, since the density is so good, the XP is really good, right? So kind of just leveling up your character and also to get those skill points in order to get those skills. And again, the gear requirements are just really low, only really needing like 140-ish AP and then around the 240-ish DP mark. And, while you're here, you're going to get a decent amount of silver, right? Kind of ranging around the 200 to 300 million mark, which Garmoth is saying around 450 million However, it's taking account of these specific elements, which can be used to make your potion pieces, which are super important to eventually get, right, in order to get your infinite potions. So you're going to want to make sure you keep those. But if you look at my data, which I did not include those elements, I was averaging around 342 million, with the trash being around 24.8k. All right, so let's go into my rankings, and this is all subjective, right? But I'm ranking these on the ease of the spot, the potential money per hour, and just kind of how it feels, right? So it's subjective. However, if you want to let us know kind of your ranking of the grinding spots of 240 AP and below, then put it down in the comments. So kind of coming in at number 6 is Desert Nagas. So this is another good grinding spot with minimal gear requirements, only needing 100 AP and 180 DP. And you could technically choose this spot instead of Polly's Forest. The only issue with this grinding spot is the mobs are a little bit spread out, and you're considered in the desert, which you could get either hypothermia or a heat stroke, which will kind of slowly drain your health, right? Which will eventually kill you, especially if you don't know kind of what to do, right? So you could stack up health potions to kind of mitigate that health drain, or you could use like Star Tea to get rid of the hypothermia, or the purified water to get rid of the heat stroke. But you're going to get really good XP in order to like level up your character at this spot. And in terms of like the money per hour, you're kind of potentially looking at kind of around kind of the same numbers as Polly's Forest, like 200 to 300 million, with Garmoth saying 400 million. But again, if you take the elements out, then you're probably in that 200 to 300 million range, with the average trash kind of being around that 10.8k mark. All right, next up, coming in at number 5 is Protty Cave, which the negative with this grinding spot is that it's not on main land. So you have to get a ship and sell there, which I just kind of recommend getting like a raft from the ship person there at the dock, or you can do like a fishing boat, right? Because if you use a bigger ship, it won't allow you to carry your horse on it. But for some reason, a raft / fishing boat allows you to do that. So kind of annoying. It is what it is. In terms of like the gear requirements, you're going to be looking at needing 170 AP ish, and then 200 DP. And the money per hour per Garmoth is around the 504 million mark. But again, if you take out those elements, right, then you're going to probably be looking around the 300 to 400 million range, with the average trash being around 17.7k. Also, this is a really good spot to level up your character. For instance, when I was doing my season character, I came here and in just 1 hour, I went from 57 to 60. So really easy to level up your character at this spot. All right, so coming in at number 4 is Wolf Settlement, which is another good spot. And this actually drops one of the HP potion pieces, right? But the gear requirements is going to be in that 170 AP range and the 200 DP range. And the money per hour per Garmoth is going to be around 633 million, which this spot is very RNG based. So the money is very inconsistent. The average trash is going to be around 11.8k. If we look at my 2 hours here, which again, small sample, right? 2 hours. I got really RNG carried, and my money per hour was pretty crazy. I was averaging like 1.5 billion for an hour, and my trash was around 15.3k. But again, do not expect numbers like that, right? Also, my drop rate was kind of in that 268% range. All right, up next, coming in at number 3 is Gahaz Bandits, and the money per hour is really good here, especially with the low gear requirements, but you have to use Agris Fever, right? So this is an Agris Fever spot, which means you should be able to use like less than your daily 20k that's given to you, right? And so if you're a new player, the importance of Agris is that it basically boost your your trash loot, right? So you can see a huge jump in your silver that is gained. Gear requirements is going to be kind of in that 140 AP range and then 180 DP range. And in terms of the money per hour, with a level 2 loot scroll and with Agris turned on, is kind of in that 655 million range, with the average trash being in the 21.6k range. Now, my average numbers, it was 571 million, with my average trash being around 18.3k, and that was with Succession Zerker. Now, probably my favorite grinding spot out of all of these, kind of the below the 240 AP, coming in at number 2 is Centaurs, because the money per hour is really good, especially with the low gear requirements, but it also depends on the class that you're playing, right? And the use of Agris Fever, because this is an Agris Fever efficient spot, right? And again, Agris basically is going to boost your trash loot gains, so you can see a huge jump in that silver. But I'll be honest though, if you're playing a slow mobility class, then it won't be as good of a spot for you. All right. Gear requirements, we're going to be looking at needing about 180 AP and about 200 DP. And in terms of the money per hour, which, with a level 2 loot scroll and with Agris turned on, is kind of around that 697 million range, with the average trash being around 24.6k. Now that average trash numbers will most likely be much lower, right, as a newer player, especially again if you're playing a low mobility class. Unfortunately, I did not save my grind sessions into Garmoth for some reason. I don't know where they're at, but when I was here about a year ago, I was averaging around 800 million an hour, and my trash was in the 24 to 25k range with Succession Zerker, and around 21k with my Awakening Warrior. All right, so the number 1 grinding spot for season server or below the 240 AP mark is going to be Kratuga, which the gear requirements is going to be much higher for this spot, but the money potential is also much higher. In terms of the gear, you're going to want to need to have around 230-ish AP and then around 300 DP. Now, in order to kind of get into Kratuga, you're going to need at least 1 Black Spirit Claw, which you can just get off the market. But if you want all the details, just watch the guide that I made on this grinding spot, and I'll link that down in the description. But in terms of the money potential here with a level 2 loot scroll and with Agris turned on, because this is an Agris efficient spot, Garmoth is averaging this around 748 million, and the average trash is kind of around 57k. With my personal numbers, my average money was around 800 million and my average trash was around 50k. But once I got familiar with the spot and kind of the rotation, I was getting around 58k with my Awakening Warrior. So your class can also kind of depend on the trash numbers. If you have a high mobility class, then you have a potential to get even more trash loot. All right, so now moving past seasonal server or past the 240 below AP, let's take a look at mid-game grinding spots, which I'm going to define that as 240 AP and up to around 300 AP. Now, you could just stay at Kratugas or Centaurs after you graduate your season character, for a while and still make really good silver. But let's take a look at those mid-game grinding spots. All right, coming in at number 7 is Rudum Outstation, which this is going to be in the Elvia server, but gear requirement wise, you're going to need around 260-ish AP and then 360-ish DP. And in terms of the money per hour, it's going to be around the 798 million, with the average trash kind of being around the 22k. Now with my personal trash numbers, I was averaging around 609 million, with my average trash being around 18.6k. All right, coming in at number 6 is going to be Swamp Bogans and Swamp Nagas. which I'm going to just combine those two. It is two separate grinding spots, but they're going to be in the Elvius server. So first looking at Bogans, the gear requirement is going to be around 240-ish AP and then 330 DP, and the money per hour is going to be around the 688 million range, with the average trash being around 17.7k. Now with my personal trash numbers, I was averaging around 685 million, with my average trash being around 17.1k. And then if we look at Nagas, the gear requirement is going to be around the 240-ish AP and the 330-ish DP range. And then in terms of the money per hour, it's going to be around the 616 million, with the average trash being around 15.1k. And then my personal numbers here at this spot, I was averaging around 590 million, and my average trash was kind of around the 14.1k. So you can kind of see that Fogans, you're going to potentially make some extra money there, right around maybe 100 million. Also with these spots, you have to take account of the shards, right? So your money per hour might be a little bit more inflated because of the shards, right? So Garmoth is taking account of those shards, and the shards are used to make specific cups, which then can be sold at a later date. So you kind of have to look at it as like an investment. All right, coming in at number 5 is Primal Giants. So this is also going to be in the Elvius server. Gear requirements, you're going to need around 280-ish AP and then around 380 DP. And in terms of the money per hour, it's going to range around 870 million, with the average trash being around 25.4k. Now with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 695 million, with my average trash being around 22.2k. All right, coming in at number 4 is going to be Orc Camp. This grinding spot used to be the grinding spot back in the day that everyone used to do regardless of your gear. But now with the variety of grinding spots, including Dekia, it's not as popular, right? Because you can make more money elsewhere. But looking at the gear, you're going to need around 260-ish AP and then around 340 DP. And then in terms of money per hour, with just a level 2 loot scroll is around the 813 million, with the average trash being around 23k. Now the issue with this spot is the money per hour, and this is kind of a lot of the Elvius spots that have the shards, but the money per hour is going to be a little bit skewed because Garmoth is taking account of the shards, which essentially you have to combine those with other shards from other grinding spots to make certain cups, which then you can sell on the market, right? So if we take those shards out of the equation, then you can expect maybe about 150-ish less million. With my personal numbers, my average money per hour was around 841 million, including the shards, right? And my average trash was around 19 to 20k. All right, coming in at number 3 is going to be Jade Starlight Forest, which this place is pretty cool because it's snowing, right? And who doesn't love snow? But it's also just a different biome. The gear requirement, you're going to need around 260-ish AP and then 350-ish DP. And then in terms of the money per hour, with just a level 2 loot scroll and with Agris, because this is an Agris efficient spot, you're going to be looking at around 1 billion, right? And then the average trash is going to be around 29.8k. With my personal numbers, my average money was around 1.2 billion, with my average trash being around 19k. For some reason, I was getting like 10k less than what other people were saying that they were getting. Also, my numbers are pretty skewed because I actually ended up getting the actual raw flame drop that's worth like, I think it was like worth 2 billion at the time when I was doing this grinding spot. So yeah, and again, limited numbers, right? So it's just can be very skewed. So just keep that in mind for this grinding spot. But I think overall, really cool biome, really cool spot to check out. All right, coming in at number 2 is going to be Gyfin Underground. So this is probably one of my favorite spots in the 260 to 300 AP gear range, and it's probably one of the best, if not the best, XP spots to level up your character. Gear requirements is going to be in the 290-ish AP range and then 380 DP-ish range. And this place can definitely one-shot you if you're not paying attention. And in terms of the money per hour, it's going to be around 979 million, with the average trash being around 28k. Now, with my personal trash numbers, I was averaging around 922 million, with my average trash being around 22k. All right, so coming in at number 1 is going to be Holgilim Base. And this is probably the best spot as of right now within this 240 to 300 AP range. And it's one of the newer spots that just released. The only negative with this spot is it's across the ocean in the land of the morning light. So if you haven't unlocked fast travel, then it's going to be very inconvenient for you to come here. In terms of the gear requirements, you're going to need around 270-ish AP, probably a little bit more to be more efficient at this spot, and then around 360 DP. So you just need to be mindful of the DP aspect, because I feel like a lot of the newer players are trying to come to this spot and they have the AP, but they don't have the DP, so they're dying pretty easily. But yeah, it's a super simple spot. It's really fun to do. I have a video on this spot, a very detailed video on this spot that I'll put down in the description. In terms of the money per hour with just using a level 2 loot scroll is going to be around the 1 billion range, with the average trash being around 29k. With my personal numbers, my average money was around 869 million, with my average trash being around 26.4k. All right, so now in-game grinding spots, which I'm going to say that's essentially over 300 AP or over 800 total AP, and there are a lot to choose from, so I'm not necessarily going to mention every single one. So if you think there should be one on this list that I did not mention, then let us know down in the comments. Also, I'm not going to go by the sheet AP, but more so of the total stats, right? When we look at AP and DP, because I think that shows kind of a better representation on the gear you actually need for these in-game grinding spots. Also, my rankings is probably going to be a little biased based on my own gear score and class that I play, because honestly, some of these spots I probably really had no business even going to, because I wasn't even really reaching the AP cap nor the DP cap. So I encourage you to try out all of these spots to kind of assess your own money per hour. But let's take a look at my rankings. All right, so coming in at number 9 is Crypt of Resting Thoughts. I hate this place. When I was here, it was absolutely brutal. I ended up losing like around 7 billion in silver at this spot because I lost some expensive crystals. But it's my fault. I probably should have run some like resistance crystals. So, oh well. But in terms of gear requirement, the total AP is going to be around 800 plus, right? So total AP 800 plus, and then the DP is going to be 440. And then in terms of the money per hour, you're going to be looking at around 1 billion, with the average trash being around 17.5k. Now, with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 364 million, with my average trash being around 8.4k. So honestly, I probably had no business being here at this spot with my gear score at the time. And I wasn't playing a meta PvE class, and again, my gear really wasn't that great. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at my numbers. All right, coming in at number 8 is going to be Dekia Thornwood. This is another spot that I really underperformed at, but gear requirement wise, the total AP is going to be 950 plus and 440 DP. And then in terms of the money per hour is going to be around 1.4 billion, with the average trash being around 19.6k. With my personal numbers, I was averaging around 495 million, with my average trash being around 8.5k. And yeah, this was about 7 months ago when I did this spot, and again, not really playing a meta PvE class. If I did it now, maybe it would be different. All right, coming in at number 7 is Darkseeker's Retreat, which they actually just adjusted this spot recently and increased the AP requirements, which looking at the gear requirements, you're going to need around over 1,000 total AP and over 540 DP. And in terms of the money per hour, according to Garmoth, it's going to be around 2.2 billion. And I've seen even some people record an average of 3 billion, which is actually nuts. Average trash is going to be around the 30.8K, and this is going to be an Agris efficient spot. Now with my personal numbers, which was before the changes, so it would definitely be different now, but honestly, I don't even have the gear to do this place now. But when I was here about 6-ish months ago, I was averaging around 669 million with my average trash being around 7.4K. But again, these numbers were before the multiple changes that have happened over the past year. But, you know, from kind of what I've seen, you know, if you're super geared and playing a meta PvE class, then the money potential is probably actually going to be one of the highest in the game. And if I could actually grind this spot, and this grinded spot, Darkseeker's Retreat, would probably be much lower on my list. All right, so coming in at number 6 is going to be Tungrad Ruins. So I haven't actually personally tried out this spot because I just don't have the gear to be very efficient at grinding this spot, but it is a popular spot within the community. In terms of gear requirement, you're going to need total AP to be at least over 1,000 and then 450 DP. And in terms of the money per hour, according to Garmoth, it's going to be around 1.4 billion, and the average trash is going to be around 22.4K. All right, coming in at number 5 is going to be Olin's Valley, which again, I haven't tried out the spot, but it's another popular spot within the community because of the money per hour is really good, and you can get one of the rich merchant ring pieces. This is a party grind spot, which I think is a positive, and I feel like we just need more relevant party grind spots anyway. There is a regular version, a Dekia 1 version, and a Dekia 2 version of this spot, which Dekia 2 is insane. So we're just going to take a look at Dekia 1 for the gear requirements and the money potential. But for Dekia 1, in terms of gear, you're going to need around the total AP of 950 and then 440 DP. And then in terms of the money per hour, according to Garmoth, it's going to be around 1.07 billion, and the average trash is going to be around 4.5K. All right, coming in at number 4 is going to be Highlands. This spot is pretty cool because of the mechanics, which at a certain point in the grind, you can actually just chill for like a minute or so while the spider machine just kills the mobs for you. Also, the biome is really cool because it's snowing. And again, who doesn't like snow? Looking at the gear requirements, the total AP you're going to need is going to be like over 1,000 and then 460 DP. And according to Garmoth, in terms of the money per hour, it's going to be around the 1.5 billion range, with the average trash being around 39.7K. And this is another Agris efficient spot. Now, with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 456 million, with my average trash being around 13.3K. Unfortunately, when I was here about 10 months ago, I just died a bunch of times, so my trash numbers, you know, really got affected by that. Also, I just wasn't hitting the AP range anyway. But overall, really cool spot. You know, I think just me personally with my recent gear upgrades, I'm going to try this spot again and kind of see how I do with it. All right, coming in at number 3 is going to be Trolls. I actually really enjoyed this spot, and it's pretty straightforward with the mechanics, and the trash loot value is extremely high at this spot. I think it's like around 97-ish K for the trash loot. In terms of the gear requirement, the total AP is going to be around 900 and then 440 DP. And then the money per hour potential, according to Garmoth, is going to be around 1.4 billion, with the average trash being around 9.7K. Now, with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 909 million, with my average trash being around 6.4k. All right, coming in at number 2 is going to be Dekia Kadri, and this is a pretty good spot if you're new to Dekia. Looking at the gear requirement, the total AP is going to be 950 and the DP is going to be 440. And in terms of the money per hour, according to Garmoth, it's going to be around 1.6 billion, with the average trash being around 35.6k. And this is an Agris efficient spot. Now with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 1.03 billion, with my average trash being around 27k. All right, coming in at number 1 is going to be Dekia Crescent Shrine. Now, this is kind of similar to Dekia Kadri, right, with its money per hour. However, this spot tends to make a little bit more because the trash loot is worth a few thousand more. However, this spot is in the desert, so it's a little bit more inconvenient. But for me personally, this has been the best spot in terms of my money per hour for my gear and for my class that I play. The gear requirement for this spot, the total AP is going to be 950 and 440 DP. And in terms of the money per hour, according to Garmoth, it's going to be around 1.632 billion, with the average trash being around 34k. And again, this is an Agris efficient spot. Now with my personal numbers, I was averaging around 1.2 billion, with my average trash being around 27.9k. And with, Dekia Kadri and Dekia Crescent Shrine is going to have the chance for the Deboreka accessories to drop. So that's going to only increase your money per hour potential. All right, so we made it to the end. What a video. It's probably my longest guide video I've ever made. But that's the current best grinding spots that I think that are the most relevant in 2025. Now, of course, I didn't go over every single grind spot. So, if you think that I missed a really important one that I did not mention in the video, please, let us know down in the comments. And I would love to kind of hear your ranking from, 240 AP below, and then the 240 to 300 AP, and then the 300 AP or 800 total AP and above. I would love to kind of hear kind of where your specific rankings are within all of those grinding spots. Also, there are always, updates happening in this game, so the grinding spot numbers could always change, just like Darkseeker's Retreat, right? That has changed multiple times throughout the past year in 2024, so you just never know. But at least for right now, these are my top picks to kind of maximize your time and silver, depending on your gear. But thanks for watching. As always, you're awesome. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.
Sunsets on that desert sky. It's just you.